Hello, my name is Aaron Ballantyne. I'm going to take you through one of the Coachaid Sports Education Programme sessions on Fluid for Sport. We quotation to start with: for a person undertaking regular exercise, any fluid deficit that is incurred during one exercise session can potentially compromise the next session if adequate fluid replacement does not occur. And obviously, if you're dehydrated during a session, it's going to affect that session as well. Water and fluids. Water becomes the most important performance-enhancing nutrient when exercise and heat stress are actually combined. In general, dehydration is not good for achieving optimal athletic performance while exercising. There are some sports where it may be beneficial, but guidance should be sought in preparing athletes to consider this. And in general, even during these sports, I personally wouldn't recommend being dehydrated. Without fluid intake, blood volume will drop, sweat rates will drop, and body heat will start to rise. It is very difficult to consume enough fluids to match those lost during exercise, particularly those in the heat, but we should strive to try and replace as much as we possibly can. Most athletes and coaches are aware that a reduction in the body's water content will impair exercise performance, but what actually happens? Well, as we start to sweat, if we're not especially if we're not replacing that water, and our body starts to dehydrate. What does that mean? Well, in terms of, say, our blood, for instance, it means blood volume will start to decrease because plasma volume will start to decrease. That drop in plasma volume will then affect blood pressure, and the heart will have to work harder to get the same amount of blood to the working muscle. That means heart rate will go up. You'll find it harder to deliver that oxygen that you need to that working muscle, so your performance is going to start to deteriorate. And we'll look at some of the other possible effects later on, and just how serious some of these effects can be. Hydration status is determined by the balance of water intake versus that of output. Okay, so on one side we've got water going out in terms of sweat, perspiration, breath even coming out. You can see it on a cold day, the amount of water vapour comes out of it as you breathe out. We've also got fluids that we lose when we go into the toilet. In terms of coming back in again, then we've got the drinks that we drink, we've got the food that we eat, and we've also got water that's given off by metabolic processes in the body which can then be used. Water accounts for about 50 to 70% of the body mass in most people. Females have less than males, they are lighter and have a higher proportion of body fat. Muscle has more water content than fat, and males tend to have higher body muscle mass than females. An important route of water and electrolyte loss is through sweating, so we tend to lose a lot of water through our sweat. And if you've ever tasted sweat, as it runs down your face, you'll taste it, it's salty. Okay, so we're losing electrolytes in that sweat as well as the fluid. Functions of water. An awful lot of functions of water in the body. Obviously maintain life. We can survive only a few days without it. It gives structure and form to the body. People think, how does water give structure? But think of something like a waterbed. So water actually helps give structure to our body. Red blood cells carry oxygen in the plasma. So our large percentage of our blood is made up of blood plasma, or the watery bit of the blood. Transport nutrients around, such as glucose, electrolytes, iron. Transport of metabolic waste products such as CO2 and other products to get them away from places in the body so we can expel them. Transport hormones to target sites, so it helps carry blood helps carry hormones around the body to where they're needed, or where the target sites are. Synovial fluid lubricates our joints. Water makes up a large percentage of synovial fluid. Helps create joints, helps create that sort of lubrication in the joint, the WD-40 of the joint, that helps protect the joint, keeps joints healthy, helps protect organs around the body. It regulates body temperature by absorbing heat with only small changes in temperature and dissipating that heat through sweat and perspiration or evaporation. Influences blood pressure and cardiovascular function. I've already said, as blood volume levels start to change, then blood pressure can change because the heart has to work harder to get thicker blood pumping around the body. Fatigue during prolonged exercise is caused mainly by two things: We've got substrate depletion, such as carbohydrate. When we're dehydrated, we will use more carbohydrates as fuel, therefore our stores will be used up quicker. And obviously temperature regulation and fluid balance. Why do we sweat? Metabolic processes produce heat. Okay, so when we exercise, we start to warm up. Internal body temperature then starts to increase. Our body likes to work within very small boundaries or very small ranges in everything it does. So for instance, our muscle likes to work within very small ranges of pH values, which is really one of the reasons why lactic acid then produced in the lactate system starts to affect our ability to exercise and stops the muscle from working properly. Likewise, our body temperature likes to stay within a very small range of only a couple of degrees plus or minus what would be seen as the average. Outside those, then we're suffering from hyperthermia or hypothermia. So metabolic processes produce heat, internal body temperature starts to increase. Excess heat then must be dissipated somehow. And we do that by sweating. So heat generated in exercise is transferred from the body's core to the skin via our blood. Okay, so blood heats up in our core. That heated blood is then taken to our extremities, our skin, where when we're warm we can see our face starting to get red, our skin starting to get red, and that's the blood going to the skin to try and actually get rid of the heat. So when it reaches the skin, we are sweating, that sweat evaporates off, so the heat from the blood heats up the liquid sweat on our skin, and evaporation then takes heat away. Evaporation of sweat usually accounts for about 80% of heat loss during exercise. So if anything affects that evaporation of sweat, then we can see that we could very quickly be in trouble, because 80% of our heat loss is suddenly stopped, and our body then will start to heat up very, very rapidly. Things that can affect that are maybe exercise in a very hot, humid environment, where the environment's already highly saturated with water, and as we start to try and heat up the water on our skin, as our blood heats it up to try and evaporate, it has nowhere to go, so it just stays there, and we can't get rid of the heat the way we usually can. Or when you're very, very dehydrated, sweating can actually be reduced and eventually stop, and obviously then again there's no way to get rid of that 80% of normal heat loss. So sweat rates of up to 1.5 litres per hour during moderate intensity exercise are not uncommon, and that's even in our normal temperate environment. Athletes must be fully hydrated before they train or compete, because the body cannot adapt to dehydration. Training quality will start to suffer in training. We're looking at about 35 millilitres per kilogram of body weight in adults, plus losses are 50 millilitres per kilogram body weight in those less than 18-year-olds, plus losses. Okay, so our core starts to heat, so increased core temperature sensed by the brain. So the brain switches on our sweat mechanisms. Hot blood is then pumped from the core to the skin, the cooler skin. Heat is then transferred into the atmosphere via mainly evaporation of sweat. But what can happen, if we're not replacing fluid enough, dehydration can start to occur. If dehydration occurs and not enough water is present for sweating, core temperature will start to rise, and we will start to suffer for it badly. And in hot humid conditions, as I've already said, sweat doesn't evaporate, and that can cause our core temperature to rise as well. So body temperature increases. So what can go wrong? Well, first of all, when that body temperature starts to increase, we can see impaired performance. We'll have a look at the performance detriment effect that can have in a minute. We can start to then suffer from heat stress. Okay, so we can go through the range of heat disorders, such as heat cramps for starters. Then we can go through from heat cramp into heat exhaustion. And then the last one, heat stroke. I mean, people often talk about having heat stroke, but what they really have had is probably heat exhaustion and a bit of sunstroke. Proper heat stroke, you're looking at potential circulatory collapse and death. Okay, so heat stroke, hypothermia, and possible eventually, you say, if it leads to circulatory collapse, it can lead to death. So adverse effects, some physiological effects then, impaired performance. You're looking at about 2% loss of body weight and you're going to have impaired performance. For about every 1% or so there, you're going to get a decrease in aerobic performance of about 2%. So a 2% loss where we're saying this impaired performance incurs, you're probably looking at a decrease in aerobic performance of about 4%. That'll equate to a 63.4 kilogram athlete or 10 stone. That'll equate to about 1.3 kilograms or about 2.4 pounds. And we've already said that exercise session, it isn't uncommon for somebody to lose up to 1.5 litres of sweat. That's about 1.5 kilograms or so. So we're seeing that in a normal exercise session. Capacity for muscular work declines at about 4% or 2.5 kilograms. Heat exhaustion then occurs at about 5% of body weight lost or about 3.2 kilograms in this 63.4 kilogram athlete, or 7 pounds if we go imperial there, or 10 stone athlete. Hallucinations will start occurring about 7%. So around about 4.5 kilograms, we'll start to see things. Circulatory collapse and heat stroke then, and potential death at around about 10% of body weight. So about 6.4 kilograms or 14 pounds in terms of the 63.4 kilogram athlete. When you look at some ultra endurance events, particularly things like the races in the Nevada Desert, American Death Valley, then 6.4 kilograms of sweat loss in a day is actually easily achievable, and those people are obviously having to drink vast amount of water to make sure that they aren't losing that type of water loss over the day, or that type of body weight loss. How to recognise dehydration. So, very small slides here, sorry about that, but hopefully you can read them. Get the PDF off the website, read it if you can't see the board here. So changes in body weight pre and post training, obviously. So allow coaches, medical staff to see what athletes can usually lose in a training session or competition. Hydration plans then can be individualised on that. So if you look at how much weight you're actually losing compared to the amount you're drinking, and then you maybe need to adapt your drinking then. So if you're losing a kilogram in body weight during your session, then you should probably be trying to aim for drinking nearly up to an extra litre of water during that session if possible. Or at least to replace that after the session. Urine test. Colour is a practical way that athletes can use. Specific gravity of urine measures the concentration of urine. The more concentrated, the more dehydrated the athlete is. A good field test for athletes is to determine if they're prepared for training or competition. Results prior to training or competition allow you to make interventions to improve hydration before you start. So for every 1 kilogram of body weight lost, you should be drinking about 1.5 litres. So for really basically 1.5 times the amount you lose. So if you're losing a kilogram, you're going to be drinking 1.5 litres. So about half again is the amount you're going to, if you lose 500 millilitres, then you should be drinking about 7.5 or 750 millilitres. So half, whatever you've lost, plus half again. The reason for that is because once you start to drink that amount of water, what will happen is your kidneys will get turned on and you'll start actually to go to the toilet. So you'll lose some of the fluid that you're actually gaining back through going to the toilet. So to make up for that toilet loss, then you're going to be wanting to drink a wee bit more than you actually have lost through your weight. So about 1.5 times the amount that you've lost. Just a quick example of a P chart here as well. We've talked about urine test. Very simple to do. The darker the urine, the more dehydrated you are. If you can, you want to keep your urine up around the 1 and 2 level there, if possible, which means you're well hydrated. By the time you get to 4 or 5, it suggests you're starting to sort of dehydrate. 6, 7, 8, you're looking at severe dehydration, and you're up to around about the 8 level there. If your urine's that colour, then you really do have a problem. So P chart, very simple way to keep an eye out on your urine. If you're obviously looking at it in the toilet bowl, remember that it's mixing in with the water that's in the toilet bowl, so it's probably lighter looking than it should be. Body weight is a measure of hydration. Very, very simple again way to do. Same as with the urine test. All you're going to do is measure your weight before and after exercise. So in this case we're saying that measure weight before exercise in minimal clothing, and then immediately after exercise. So for example, if somebody was 60 kilograms before in minimal clothing, measured again afterwards, or 58. Why minimal clothing? Well, obviously if you've got a lot of clothing on, it's going to be, during that exercise session, it's going to be absorbing sweat, and you're going to be then measuring the amount of fluid in your absorbing into your clothes as well. So a minimal amount of clothing if possible. So in this example, somebody of 60 kilograms ends up as 58 kilograms after their session. So how much fluid was in the drinks bottle, maybe before exercise and directly after? So you're going to have to take that into account, how much is actually drunk during the session as well. So an 800 milliliter bottle at the start. After exercise, 300 milliliters left. That means the person has drunk 500 milliliters or half a litre. Urinary toilet losses weight before or after going to the toilet, and you can work that out as well. So with a quick example here of a calculation that could be done. So fluid deficit, change in weight, 60 kg beforehand, 58 kilograms after, to 2 kilogram difference or 200 milliliters of fluid lost. Fluid intake was 500 milliliters. Urine toilet loss 59, that's 58 kilograms, or 58 kilograms equals 1 kilogram or 100 milliliters. So total losses then, we've got 200 milliliters from our weight, 500 minus 1000 milliliters equals about 1500 milliliters of sweat loss. Okay, so with 2000 plus the 500 from the drinks bottle, minus 1000 from the losing in urine, and we've got 1500 milliliter sweat loss altogether after that training session. Okay, so percentage dehydration then, total fluid loss divided by pre-exercise weight times 100. We've got 2 divided by 60 multiplied by 100 equals 3.3%. So the person has lost about 3.3% in dehydration. Which, if we go back to our slide, 3.3% capacity. We're in between impaired muscle performance here and the capacity for muscular work to decline, okay, which is 2% to 4%. So we're going to be in impaired performance in terms of this person. Okay, we'll take a break there. That's the end of part 1 of this session on fluid, and we look forward to seeing you in part 2.